In 1973, the richest family in American history held a reunion. Hundreds of people. One famous name. Not one millionaire in the room. A family that once owned more wealth than the US government. Gone in 3 generations. No theft, no war, no single mistake. Just 3 generations of normal human behavior. And that's what should scare you. Because whatever you're building right now, a business, a career, savings, a future, the same force that destroyed the Vanderbilts is already working against you too. You just can't feel it yet. 1810, Staten Island. A 16-year-old boy standing at the edge of a dock at 5 a.m. Cold water. Fog so thick he can't see Manhattan. A flat-bottomed boat that cost his mother's entire savings. No education, no connections. No plan except one: he was never going to be poor again. His name was Cornelius Vanderbilt, and he was, without question, the most dangerous businessman America ever produced. Not dangerous like aggressive. Dangerous like unpredictable. The kind of man who smiled while he destroyed you and genuinely felt nothing about it afterward. He started with that one boat, ferried passengers across the harbor, but while other ferry operators just ran their routes, Cornelius studied everything. Which docks overcharged, which weather patterns his competitors refused to navigate but he could, which passengers would pay extra for speed. Every inefficiency in New York Harbor became a weapon in his hands. By 19, he was earning more than his father. By 30, he owned a fleet. His strategy never changed. Enter a market, cut prices so low that competing becomes economically irrational, wait for rivals to bleed out, then buy their operations for nothing. Clean, ruthless, completely effective. One competitor consortium got so desperate, they made him an offer that still sounds insane. $100,000 a year, roughly $3 million today, just to stay away, just to leave them alone and go ruin someone else. Cornelius took the money, smiled, then entered their lane anyway. His reasoning? He'd agreed to leave. He'd changed his mind. No written contract specified how long he had to stay out. When they protested, he shrugged. That's who built this empire. Not a gentleman, not a philanthropist. A man who treated business like war and never once confused winning with being liked. But here's what made Cornelius truly different from every other rich man of his era. And this is the part that explains everything that came after. In the 1860s, American railroads were a complete disaster. Incompatible tracks, corrupt management, constant delays. Most serious investors stayed far away. Cornelius looked at that chaos and felt something most people never feel about chaos: hungry. He started buying, small lines first, then bigger ones. Connected them, standardized them, eliminated the waste, built a continuous railroad from New York City to Chicago. First time in history, those cities were linked by a single unified system. Every manufacturer who needed to reach East Coast markets now had one gatekeeper: Cornelius Vanderbilt. By 1877, when he died at 82, his fortune stood at $100 million. But the raw number misses the point entirely. His wealth represented 1/87th of the entire US GDP, not adjusted for inflation, proportional to the whole economy. No American, not Carnegie, not Rockefeller, not Gates, not Musk, has ever held a larger share of national wealth. By the only measure that captures true dominance, Cornelius Vanderbilt was the richest human being America ever produced, and on his deathbed, he looked at his children and grandchildren gathered around him and said something that should have terrified them. Any fool can make a fortune. It takes a man of brains to hold on to it. They nodded respectfully. They had no idea what he was talking about, because what Cornelius had, the thing that built all of it, wasn't money. It was a feeling, the specific, unshakable feeling of knowing what it's like to have nothing. That feeling made him paranoid, obsessive, impossible to satisfy, constitutionally unable to stop competing. You cannot put that feeling in a will. You cannot give it to children who grew up with servants. And what happened in the generation immediately after Cornelius died is the moment the clock started, though nobody realized it yet. William Henry Vanderbilt inherited $90 million and did something remarkable. He doubled it. In 8 years, through disciplined management and careful reinvestment, William turned $90 million into $200 million. He thought like his father, worked like his father, stayed hungry enough to keep growing. Then he got tired. He retired at 64, split the fortune among his 8 children, and died 2 years later. Probably the last moment the Vanderbilt fortune could have been saved if anyone had understood what was coming. Because here's what William's decision actually did. It didn't just divide money, it divided identity. Cornelius was one man with one mission. Now there were 8 separate Vanderbilts, each with their own piece, each needing to justify their inheritance with visible, impressive, expensive proof of worthiness. And the most expensive thing in 1880s America? Looking like you belonged at the top. This is where the story stops being about money and starts being about something that should feel uncomfortably familiar. Alva Vanderbilt woke up every morning with one goal: be taken seriously by people who didn't take her seriously yet. She threw a housewarming party in 1883 that cost $250,000. $8 million in today's money. The entire purpose was to force an invitation from Caroline Astor, New York's self-appointed queen of high society, who had been refusing to acknowledge the Vanderbilts as a legitimate aristocracy. The party worked. Astor came. The invitation followed, and Alva spent the next 20 years chasing that feeling again. Her brother-in-law George went further. He built Biltmore Estate in North Carolina, 8,000 acres, 250 rooms, private library of 22,000 books, indoor swimming pool, bowling alley, hundreds of staff, cost $6 million to build, another $1 million every single year to run. George used it for a few weeks each year. He was genuinely intelligent, spoke 8 languages, read serious philosophy, had real intellectual depth. He just had absolutely no interest in building anything. No business, no investment, no new idea that generated more than it consumed. When he died in 1914, he left his wife with the most expensive liability in America. Now pause here for a second, because before you judge George, ask yourself honestly, when you get comfortable, really comfortable, do you still have the same hunger you had when things were hard? Most people don't. That's not weakness, that's human nature. Comfort is supposed to feel good. That's why it's so dangerous. The Vanderbilts didn't fail because they were bad people. They failed because they were normal people, with abnormal amounts of money and no system to protect them from their own normalcy. But even all of this, the parties, the mansions, the lifestyle, might not have been fatal. What made collapse mathematically certain was something much quieter. And it was already happening underneath everything. 8 children, dozens of grandchildren, scores of great-grandchildren, each one carrying the name, each one expected to live like a Vanderbilt, each one drawing from a fortune that wasn't growing anymore because nobody was focused on growing it. The math is silent and merciless. Meanwhile, the railroads, the actual engine, were being regulated into ordinary businesses. The Interstate Commerce Act capped their pricing power. Competition emerged. The monopoly that generated everything became just another industry. The 20th century was exploding with opportunity. Oil, automobiles, aviation, finance. People who started with nothing were building fortunes that dwarfed what the Vanderbilts had. The Vanderbilts missed every single one, not because the opportunities were invisible, because nobody in the family was hungry enough to chase them. 4 generations of complete financial security had quietly removed the psychological machinery that turns opportunity into action. Think about your own life for a second. The goals you had when you had nothing. The fire that existed when failure was actually possible. Does that fire feel the same today as it did then? For most people, the honest answer is no. That's the Vanderbilt virus, and it spreads in exactly one direction, and downward, through generations, through comfort, through the removal of consequences. Then 1929 arrived, and what the Depression did wasn't destroy the Vanderbilts, just made visible what had been true for 30 years already. Gloria Vanderbilt was Cornelius's great-great-granddaughter. She grew up with the name, but not the money, fought through public scandal, failed marriages, real financial pressure, built her own fortune through work, fashion, art, business, decades of showing up when it would have been easier not to. When she died in 2019, she left almost nothing to her son Anderson Cooper, on purpose. Cooper explained it in one sentence that contains more financial wisdom than most books ever written. I don't believe in inherited wealth, it's an initiative sucker. 4 words, the entire Vanderbilt story. Cornelius had one thing that no amount of money could manufacture for his descendants. He knew what it felt like to have nothing. That knowledge made him paranoid, obsessive, insatiable. It was uncomfortable. It was also the only thing that worked. Every structure his family built to protect their children from that discomfort also protected them from becoming the kind of person who could hold on to what he'd built. The fortune lasted 96 years. The name lasted forever. And the distance between those 2 outcomes is the only question that actually matters, not just for dynasties, but for anyone building anything worth keeping. When you finally get comfortable, What happens to the hunger that got you there? The Vanderbilts never answered that question. Maybe you still can. If this story hit different and you want to understand how one family actually did solve this problem across 6 generations, they made one decision the Vanderbilts never made. It changed everything.